get is y'all don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
Hola.
What's up?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It's race week once again. As the guys head up to Baku to race what is the final European race of the season for Formula One, and we've got some big news already. A couple things that we want to kind of go over, and obviously we'll talk about the race. But it seems like the most important news of the season so far, I think this is a big one, is Adrian Newey it's been confirmed at least that Adrian Newey will be joining Aston Martin here shortly, next season, I believe. And so it's good times for Aston Martin. I know that team over there was looking. They needed something. They needed a spark. They needed to bring in someone that's going to make them competitive. And if it wasn't going to be Max Verstappen, I think that you might have gotten the second best guy, if not the best guy, that you can get in Formula One right now to make those things happen. So your thoughts, guys, on the Adrian Newey situation. Talk to me a little bit. Kind of go into detail on maybe the contract details or just what this means for Aston Martin.
Go ahead, Evan.
Well, I mean, this is something that we kind of all had been expecting. There was a lot of noise around this. Obviously, there was a lot of other teams that were looking into getting his services. Ferrari was one of the names that everybody kind of thought was a big possibility, especially with Lewis going over there. Joining up with him, talking about how he would love to work with Adrian Newey, at some point in his career, but. To me, this was something I think we talked about a while back. I think that Honda pull, the money from Lance Stroll, being able to work with, a similar manufacturer when it comes to the engine provider, even going into 2026 with these new engine regulations, I think that at least knowing the people that he's going to be working with in that sense, helps out from a design, standpoint. And I think that's what, one of the reasons that it kind of pulled him over towards that signing with Aston Martin. Also, he talked about this morning, Lawrence Stroll being one of the only, active owners of a team at the races every single week, kind of a la the Eddie Jordans back in the day, or the Colin Chapman's back with Lotus back in the day, or Frank Williams when he was still in charge of Williams. He kind of sees him as that kind of old school, hands-on, in a positive way owner. We like to talk a lot in a lot of other sports how an owner being hands-on is kind of a bad thing. In this sense, he kind of looks at it as a good thing with how Lawrence is, and also being able to work with Fernando Alonso. He talked about again this morning, how that was one of his biggest rivals, one of his biggest, nemesis, or when he was at Red Bull for a long time, and the opportunity to go there and work with him at least for the next couple of years, is a big opportunity for him. But I see this as a long-term thing. It's going to be something that obviously he's got a stake in the team now. It's not just a hire, as in he's hired to do a job. He's actually a partner in this. He's going to have a stake in the actual team, and personally, I think this is the step that they're doing for 26 and trying to get Max Verstappen, because I'm sorry, an Adrian Newey car with a Honda engine and a Max Verstappen in that car is probably something that's a scary, thought for everybody else on the grid. But we'll see how that ends up working out in the next couple of years, with the trajectory that Red Bull's going. But overall, I think this is great for the sport. It's always good to see an Adrian Newey car on the track. A few years back, that team, was considered a copycat team from everybody else. Now they're going to be the ones that everybody's going to try to copy, going into the future with Adrian Newey penning, the designs on that giant easel with the pencil and everything. How about you, Vish?
Your thoughts, Vish?
Yeah, I mean, it. Ideally, they would have gotten them a little bit earlier. These 2026 cars are already, in flight a little bit in terms of design. You also got to think eventually he's going to lose his fastball here. He's been designing championship-winning cars since the 90s. So, and then the other thing, not to pour just cold water on top of this. I mean, one of the two drivers is incompetent. So when you're trying to develop a new car, that's not ideal. So you got, it's such a weird team now, right? You got all this money pouring in from Lawrence Stroll. One of the drivers is just his Nepo son. The other one is like 500 years old. And then you bring in like the most brilliant designer in F1 history. And just like, how did this group get together? So it's a bit of an eclectic group. We'll see how it works. As Evan said, getting the Honda engine is a coup for them because it's going to be a dedicated engine. They're not going to be subordinate to Mercedes. And as good as McLaren has done this year, it's been a long time since there's been a car where, not necessarily not a works team, because Red Bull, only recently basically branded their Honda engine as their own, but where there wasn't like a dedicated engine partner for a team. So, not buying, when you buy those engines off Mercedes, it puts you at a deficit. So, this could get interesting. I mean, if history is any guide, someone is going to get the 2026 car designed correctly and kind of dominate for a few years after that. So maybe it could be them.
So I guess the only question I have, which I think that's going to be great for Aston Martin. However, how does it play out? I think, Evan, you kind of mentioned it in the long run. Alonso's kind of old now, right? He's 46 years old, I think he is. And then you've got, and as Vish mentioned, not such a great driver in Lance Stroll. So I found the move interesting, considering, and this is not obviously my Ferrari bias coming through here, but the rumors were it was either Aston Martin, potentially Ferrari first, then Aston Martin. Is it Ferrari? Is it? And to me, I find it interesting that he went with that team. Reason being because you've got at Ferrari, you're going to have, whether it's for a few years or whether it's another 10 years, depending on how Lewis does, you have the greatest driver of all time, and you've got potentially the second best driver on the grid right now in Charles Leclerc. And at times he shows that he outperforms the vehicle that the machine that he has. He's shown it. He did it 2 weeks ago again in Monza. He's done it. He's done it all year, to be quite honest with you. So it shows how talented he is. For Newey to say, well, hey, and I understand there's other factors that played into him not going to Ferrari, but from a pure talent perspective, would that have been the better route to go to, or do you guys think that he made the right choice regardless?
Well, overall, what you got to remember is there's two big factors with Adrian Newey. It's, the time that he spends doing other projects, whether it be, car projects with we could say the Valkyrie that he already did with Aston Martin, or just time that he spends on the what is it, the Champions Cup or the something Cup, the America's Cup, the sailing that he does, that he's been doing, designing boats for Red Bull. He's going to keep on doing that. He loves doing those extra little side projects. And also he does have a family. He has a son who was a racer for a while. He has, a wife that he loves to spend time with. To switch, yourself up and move out to Maranello is a big change. Aston Martin's based out of Silverstone. It's literally right across the street from the Silverstone track. They have a brand new facility. They just opened up their third building. Within the past couple weeks, they're opening up a brand new wind tunnel at the end of the year. And the aerodynamic regulations for the 2026 cars don't come out until the start of next year, right when he's going to be getting there. So he's going to be starting there, and I believe it was March and they don't get the new regulations until this January coming up. So he's going to have his fingers all over that car. I think that they'll probably have another year where it'll be kind of a mid, range year next year, and then going into 2026, that's when you're going to really see the Adrian Newey effect. But I think that yes, if he wanted the short term game, he would go to Ferrari, draw up a couple cars for them, let Lewis drive it, let, Leclerc drive the cars, and that'll be it. But I think he's looking at this as more of a long-term thing. I think he's looking at this more as a building, block through the next set of regulations, looking at the team and how they're set up. Also, you're going to Ferrari, you're just a piece in the puzzle. I don't think Ferrari would ever give up the type of ownership stake that Lawrence is giving up for Aston Martin. You're going to have Adrian Newey in that team for years to come, and his say is going to mean something. At Ferrari, he's just another piece to the puzzle. Ferrari will eat him up and chew him out and use him for what he's good for, and then be done with him when they're done with him. So I think that those factors have a lot to do with it. The stability, the newness of all the facilities that they have there, and everything that goes along with that. So that's my opinion on it. I think it was better for him to do this than it would be to go to Ferrari, in my opinion.
All right. Yeah, I totally.
It's the only team where, as Evan said, that has a budget where he's gonna get autonomy. Every other team that has money to spend is not going to just hand it over to them. They're going to have an engineering team, they're going to have a design team. They divide duties up. This is the only team where they're going to hand him his pencil and his sheets of paper and say, draw whatever the hell you want, we'll build it. Any other team is going to have 500 other people involved in that. It's the reality. Ferrari's a lot of internal politics you have to navigate. Same thing with Mercedes. Same thing with McLaren. One of the reasons he left Red Bull is because of the politics there. So I'm just going to assume, obviously they're not in place yet, but Audi will probably be very similar, probably have a board of directors he's answering to and all these corporations, right? So it's just then you have Lawrence Stroll's paycheck. So funding all of Aston Martin. So I think that's probably the area where he can kind of just, they'll let him do whatever he wants.
True. Those are facts. I guess we got some other news, but we'll kind of talk about it a little bit after, unless you guys want to talk about it now. But we'll see. I think in 2026 is going to be interesting with everything that's going to happen. We can see some more changes coming down.
I'm calling it Max and Yuki 2026 in Aston Martin.
Oh.
We're marking that down right now. Yuki's going to be a free agent next year. He's not under contract. Lance is going to be out of the seat. Yuki's going to be there. And Max is going to fill in the seat in 2026 for Fernando Alonso. You're going to have the Honda connection with Yuki and with Honda, because that the Honda wants a Japanese driver in their car. And then Max is going to be there with Aston Martin too. So I called this one too. I called Adrian Newey to Aston Martin too. So you guys can't say I didn't do that. So I'm calling this one.
Unless Lance Stroll decides he does not want to drive anymore, he's going to be in that car.
No, because what they'll do is they'll put Lance in a sports car. They'll tell Lance, hey, you're going to take up the new Aston Martin Valkyrie in Le Mans, and you're going to go dominate in Le Mans with an Aston Martin Valkyrie that Adrian Newey designs. And they'll have him run the sports car side of it and just dominate, because those guys are great drivers in sports cars, but you see what happens when you put an F1 driver in one of those cars. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be up there in the front.
Yeah. Hopefully that does happen for Aston Martin. Not they're screwed. They'll still have people driving that car. Speaking of driving a car, we got a lot of drivers driving a lot of cars this weekend over in Baku at the Baku City Circuit for the Baku GP. This is one of the more interesting tracks. It's really cool. It's got a little bit of both, right? It's got some straight lines. It's got some sharp curves, some sharp corners, and it's got that octagon type little portion from turn 7 all the way over to about, I guess you could say it's 19. And then you've got some straights there with some DRS zones mixed in between, two DRS zones, and one in Sector 3 and the other in Sector 1. So yeah, this is an interesting race. It's relatively new, right? 51 laps. It's one of the longer circuits. Well, it feels like it, right? Minute 43:009. Charles Leclerc was the lap record, and we're using the C3 to the C5. What are your thoughts, guys, on this type of track? It's got both, right? It's got the turns, it's got the chicanes, it's got the corners, the sharp corners. So it's got a lot of high speed and low speed. It's got a little bit of everything here. Again, we can't say. I think at this point, are we okay with saying that this is not necessarily a Red Bull circuit? This is just. I mean, at this point, right? We've seen too much out of McLaren, even Mercedes and Ferrari, the way they've been driving right now. It's going to be a competitive race again. Who does it favor this Baku City circuit?
Well, I mean, overall, it's a street circuit, and the one thing you see with street circuits is right angles. You see these really sharp corners. Turns 1 through 5 are basically you're making a giant rectangle. Going into section 2 and between 8 and 12 is the castle section. One of the most interesting parts of any circuit in all of Formula One. The cars barely fit between the walls in that section. With how wide these cars have gotten in these past few years, you're amazed every single time you watch this race at this particular track how everybody doesn't just smash it to the wall right there. Going into turn 8, you're coming out of turn 7 and going into turn 8, you're literally coming down to almost a dead stop, because you're going to hit the wall if you even have a little bit of a lockup or a little bit of a misstep on that. But then, the straightaway basically going from turn 16 all the way to past the start finish line to turn 1, they're flat out that entire way. You don't lift anything on the throttle, that entire section right there from turn 16 all the way down to the first turn. And that's one of the highest braking force parts in any racetrack and any circuit in all of Formula One. So it makes for an interesting, race overall. There's a lot of wear, there's a lot of wear when it comes to the tires, the parts, and anything that could happen, with these cars. It'll happen in a track like this. It's not the easiest track overall, especially in Sector 2. Sector 1 is, like I said, it's basically a giant rectangle, but Sector 2 is kind of a little bit more difficult. So, it's not quite Monza level, difficulty, but it's up there. And it's fun because you get to see these cars do, 210 miles per hour, 220 miles per hour, something like that, by the time that they have that DRS open and they hit the end of that front straight. So I really like this track. It's, I'm not going to say it's one of my favorite ones in the entire, the entire calendar for Formula One, but I do enjoy, watching racing here overall, because I think it's kind of interesting to see how these cars fit within the walls of this track without crashing out every single lap.
Your thoughts, Vish, on
Yeah, I think Evan talked about a lot of it. Really, the start finish, that long straight is where the overtaking happens. I mean, there's turns in here theoretically, but really 19-20 is not really a turn, and then so it's a long straight. But as Evan said, that this inside sector here is tricky, and you can't obviously tell from this map. There are runoff areas after turn 1, but in the internal it's all walls, and so a lot of it is which person at the back is going to wreck and cause a safety car at the wrong time. Because they all have to navigate that, whether they're 30 seconds back or not. So just because someone races out to a big lead doesn't mean it'll actually, because the safety car bunches the field back up, and it's hard to imagine this particular grid. I gotta say there are quite a few weak drivers on the grid now. You got Colapinto, we talked about Lance Stroll earlier. At least I guess Magnussen's not there, but I don't know that Behrman at this point is any more stable. He's done the one race, but again, these are potentially people that might crash and cause a safety car. So I think this is generally a one-stop race. It is a high deg, but we haven't talked about this yet. But they did bring the 3 hardest compounds, and it's generally a one-stop race. Despite, in theory, think you should be able to overtake on that straight. It's actually a lot more difficult than you think. So maybe some of these teams will, start on hards to hang it out and try and wait for the safety car to pit, because you don't want to pit and then get caught out by the safety car. So wouldn't be surprised if we see some of that for the pit strategy. Just wait for someone to crash so you can pit and do your mandatory pit stop.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the timing of the sessions. Looks like this race, you've got FP1 real early in the morning on Friday the 13th. Ugh, hate that date. Friday the 13th, 5:30 in the morning, FP1, followed by FP2 at 9 a.m. And then it gets earlier and earlier. Saturday morning at 4:30 in the morning, FP3. And you've got qualifying at 8 a.m. So I'll probably be up because I'm old, and that's what I do now. I get up early. So regardless of whether I get sleep or not, I'm up anyways. And then we've got the race on Sundays at 7 a.m., which I hope I'm not awake that early, but I probably will be again. So, this is the last race on the European tour, as we can say. But look, I mean, it's an interesting track. It's an they're using, like you said, Vish, the hardest tire compounds, and so I think that this is it's going to be a fun one to watch. Not necessarily the best race, but I think it's going to be a fun one to watch because you might see some. God forbid anybody gets hurt, but might see some guys crashing out, not finishing, and so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Temperature looks nice. Doesn't look like there's much rain in the forecast, but it'll be nice. Middle 60s to high 80s. I don't know if that's going to play much of a role in this race as far as bad weather or even extreme hot. So I think that right in the middle. Maybe the only thing is cooling, heating up your tires a little bit. Might be the biggest issue, but it still gets pretty hot on that grid. Aside from the temperature, I don't know if you guys have anything to add on that, but aside from that, really, some drivers to watch, some teams to watch. Coming back from week break here, who are some of the teams and some of the drivers that you guys are interested in? Vish.
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at Lando. He needs to win this race. Period. I mean, if he's gonna make a dent. I'm also looking from a team perspective. I'm looking at McLaren. They need to prioritize Lando winning. Saw an interview. I'm sure everyone's aware of Will Buxton, and he was basically, I don't even understand what this team is doing. Evan and I talked about this a lot last week. You have one driver in the Drivers' Championship. How you're not prioritizing his points is beyond me. Like I hope they've had a couple of weeks off now to revisit all of the points they've thrown away by not giving Lando priority. They need to do that here. So that team is where to be like the whole, because look, in theory they're very close in the drivers now. I think it was like 8 points or something. We pulled it up last week. They should overtake Red Bull this week in the constructors, and then Lando is closing slowly the drivers. The way you accelerate that is by just giving him preference, and if Oscar's in front, tell him to pull the F over. I mean, that's, you're trying to win a championship here or not, right? And I'm curious to see how they play that, because they have not done that, and you could argue in Monza gave Oscar the advantage by having Lando pull over and tow him so he wouldn't get overtaken. Because, if he hadn't done that, then Russell would have just stayed behind Lando and been towed past Oscar into the first turn, and then Oscar paid that back by overtaking him to the second turn. So there's a little bit of issues that McLaren in terms of, I would say, team maturity they need to sort out. Yeah. So I'm kind of looking at that overall unit. If you want a competitive Drivers' Championship, the constructors is already well in play. Lando needs to win this race, and McLaren needs to definitely support that, and they haven't been doing that.
I think that for me it's Max. I'm looking at Max. It's been a while since he's on that top step of the podium, and I think that can he figure it out again and drive like a hell of a drive. I know that the car might not be what it was, or as competitive as maybe we thought it would be, but that's still potentially the fastest car on the grid. You got to go out there and you got to perform like it. You got to go out there and you got to win a race. You got to show that championship prowess, and you got to go out there and get it done. So I think that I'm going to go with the same theme. I'm going to go Red Bull, and I'm going to go Max. They've lost Adrian Newey. They've lost a couple other guys. And so does this kind of get in their head? Does Christian Horner and that whole team underperform or start to show even more chinks in the armor? Because as we can see, as you mentioned, Vish, McLaren is about to overtake them in the constructors, and Lando is right behind Max's ass in the championship. So I think that Red Bull's going to have to show me something. Checo is who he is at this point. I think that if he can finish in the top 5, top 7, that's a solid race for him at this point. We're going to need to see Max get on that podium and be at the top step. If he can do that, then this is still going to be a competition. If not, then it might get ugly quicker than we think towards just the second half of the season. What about you, Evan?
Well, you guys took my top 2 choices because obviously I'm paying attention to both those teams because those are the 2 top teams right now, and they're who we think are the best teams. But really, the third team I'm looking at right now is Mercedes. This is one of those tracks that like we've seen in the past. If something happens, if one of those they wreck up in the front, if you see McLaren and Red Bull up there fighting with each other, you could see Mercedes come in and take advantage of those situations like they have, in the last couple wins that they've had. So, this is one of those races, if everybody starts doing 2 stops, it might be another George Russell 1 stop, even though it really didn't work out too well for him at the very end, but, it still got him the preliminary win. But,
would he have gotten the win if he wasn't a cheater? That's the question.
Would he have gotten a win if he would have had a lap to put some rubber down on the tires and pick up all the marbles and get the extra kilo and whatever it was, 2 kilos that he was low?
Would those tires have held up if he was the legal weight?
That's another question. But also, that would be the third team I would think about, after Red Bull and McLaren, watching out for is, seeing what happens with them. Obviously Lewis Hamilton, I think is the more interesting story of the year with Mercedes. So I would want to see how he plays out. And he's always been pretty good at pretty good here. Charles Leclerc has the lap record and at this track in the 2019 cars, but overall, this is going to be an interesting race to see how Mercedes ends up, and where are they that third team? Is it them? Is it Ferrari with Ferrari's win last week at Monza or 2 weeks ago at Monza? That's an interesting fight moving forward, almost as interesting as, how 1 and 2 is shaping up is how is Mercedes and Ferrari fighting with each other, because all 4 of these teams have the ability to win a race at any given time at this point. It's not a domination between 1 or even 2 teams. So this is what we like seeing in Formula One. I say it almost every week. Competition is what we want to see, and the fact that we can all sit up here and name 3 different teams that we want to watch because we want to see if they have that chance to win is great for all of this.
Prediction time. I'm going to start off with you, Evan. What do you got?
Before we do that, we haven't really talked to the chat. Shout out to Kelly, Dane, Carly. That's all Evan's extended family there. Brandon, regular watcher of the show, and then we got the contribution.
CCH.
Where the baseball shows, it's where the team is in the off season. Lando chokes. I don't know. Maybe his teammate could, I think at any other team, his teammate would not, after towing his teammate through the first 3 quarters, you wouldn't let him overtake into the third. That's kind of not correct etiquette. But anyway, prediction time.
I'm just gonna throw this out there before I put my predictions. I appreciate everybody who's watching, all my family members who are watching, but we all know that the show is on mute right now because they are all watching the debate. Every single one of them is sitting there watching the debate.
They're watching you, right? At least
But exactly, they have us on mute, so they're not hearing what we're saying right now. They're watching the debate, and they have us on for the views. So we appreciate it.
So what do you got?
My predictions. I'm gonna go Lando 1, Max 2, Piastri 3. I think Max is going to come out pretty fired up. You might even see him come out and get pole this week because it was just so uncharacteristic how it ended up 2 weeks ago in Monza for him. Being as far down as they were, and it's. This is eating him alive. He lost the race that was in his home, his home race. He got demolished in the next race after that. It's like, so I'm going to go Norris, Max, and then Oscar. And then my surprise, I'm going to go Checo top 4. He's going to be number 4. Checo number 4. So you're going to have McLaren, Red Bull. That's going to be my surprise.
All right. Mine is really easy. I'm going to kind of stick to what I've been saying a lot, actually. I'm going to go Max. That's because I mentioned he's got to win. I'm going to go Max, Lando, and Leclerc. Leclerc is still driving the hell out of that car. I don't see him stopping now. So Max, Lando, and Leclerc. And Behrman putting the Haas in the top 10. That's my surprise.
Extending his points lead over a large part of the field.
Yeah.
One race.
That's what I got. What do you got, Vish?
I guess the question is Magnussen ever allowed back in that car?
Hey, he's coming back. You got to remember, he's coming back with 0 points now. He's got a whole rest of the season to rank up those points again. He's coming back with 0 penalty points now.
Yeah, he's got 7 races left to really do a number there and make sure he gets suspended again.
Causing havoc for the rest of the year.
There are 7 races left in his F1 career also, but
it's a possibility.
All right, for me, I'm gonna go Lando to win, Carlos to finish second, Oscar third, because if Oscar is second for some reason, McLaren will make sure he ends up first and. So there needs to be a car in the middle for them to act responsibly.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then, all right, God. All right, here we go. Surprise pick. Point for Valtteri Bottas.
Wow. All right. Hey, man, I'll take it.
It's got to happen eventually. This team is not scoring a point.
Eventually.
It's got to happen.
I like him. I hope he gets a point, man. Good for him. It'll be good for him.
It's got to happen eventually. Someone's got to score a point. That team, and he's the man to do it.
Unbelievable. Thank you, everybody.
Ever since he got that haircut, he hasn't been driving the same.
That little mullet thing. Thank you, everybody, for putting us on mute and giving us our views today. We appreciate it. Thank you to CCH for coming in and going crazy as usual. And
reaming you guys about the baseball show.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the other shows are going. So we got we're gonna do buckets. I think next week we got a guest on one of the assistant coaches. But 6 rings every Monday, 8:30. Football season is here.
That's it.
One of the best teams in the country. 8:30 Mondays. Join us, and then figure out what Blue shows for Blue Show and Tell because it's all in the trend.
He had a good one yesterday.
Yeah, he had a couple. He gave us a bonus one yesterday, but we're not going to tell you what it is. Go watch the show.
Go watch it.
Go watch the show. And then I am wearing Melissa's hoodie. One of her hoodies is because it's fucking cold here. So shout out to her. Yes, dude. I got off the plane. I'm like, what in the hell?
What's the weather in DC right now?
This morning it was in the 50s.
Damn.
I know. After the field's like 157 or whatever it was on Saturday, I'm like, this is a change. But anyway, go to aboutthefans.com, offer code HC10, then we get 10% off on this and her other 3 hoodies. But it is now it's hoodie season for me, not for you guys. But
yeah.
Hey, look, I got a hoodie.
That is that.
I was gonna say I got a long sleeve on.
Yeah, Jazz got those short sleeve hoodies are cool. It's just for me it defeats the purpose because it actually gets cold here.
You wear a long sleeve under. If it's
Wear the
hot,
long sleeve.
Yeah.
under.
that's what it is. There you go. There you go. We'll see you guys next week, though. Appreciate it. Have a good
Yep.
night.